Hello and welcome to my GDPR data classification spreadsheet walkthrough. Most of this template has been designed for you to copy and paste the guided color-coded squares with a minimum of typing. It is a template, so feel free to add and remove anything that suits your needs. So here I've opened it in the example worksheet of what the spreadsheet would look like once it's been filled in. On the left, we have what personal information we hold, and there are over 60 types of personal information here, listing from personal details, financial details, identity, employment details, types of monitoring, the special categories of the GDPR, physical attributes, and there's a miscellaneous section for you to add some more of your own. We move back to the top. Across the top we have the who, why, where, when, how, and who has access and what are the risks. The who is who the data is on, your staff, potential staff, clients and customers, potential customers, consultants, suppliers, and emergency contacts. Emergency contacts are there because they have no connection to your business. They're not clients, they're not customers, they don't work for you, but you hold personal information on them via your staff. On the why is the lawful basis of processing. Staff administration, client administration, consultant administration, supply administration, monitoring, marketing activities, and profiling. Now in the why, you can see there's letters. If you scroll down, you'll see when you get to copy, you have consent, contract, legal obligation, vital interest, public task, and legitimate interests. These are the legal basis for why you have that data. And then further down, for special category data, there's an additional option. So here, you have to pick not only the letters A, B, C, D, or E, F, you also need an additional number. So if you look at B8, which is for health information for staff, so you are saying you are contractually obliged, and also it's necessary for the purposes of assessment of the working capacity of the employee. So for GDPR purposes, you're telling them exactly the two parts of to why you have any special category data. And all you do is you just copy the relevant section, and then you scroll up, and then you paste as appropriate. Moving on to the where, which is where we store the data. The first entry is manual or printed records, and don't forget photocopies count as well. So anything that you have that's been printed and filed away, you need a corresponding square against any of the personal details that you put a square before. Everything tallies up. So for staff, there's 4 entries for staff here, in fact right across the board, so there will have to be a minimum of these 4 squares filled in somewhere. The where, this is an overview worksheet. There is a more detailed where worksheet drilling right down to the nitty-gritty. So this is just a first pass overview of where your data is, whether it's local digital records, in other words held on your computer or device itself. There's a local file server, so it's in the building. There's private cloud service, public cloud service, an external hosted service, or you've actually handed it to a third-party company. There's an X against some of these, and if you scroll down again to the bottom, you'll see that the X means that the data is also located outside of the EU. And also remember that you have to include the X if the data is backed up outside of the EU as well. So even though the main location may be in the EU, if the backups are outside, then that means all of it is outside. Moving back up to the when we obtain the information. For a lot of people, for staff, it will be on staff appointment or pre-appointment. So where they've emailed in CVs. At request is when you've asked for it. At the time is when they met and contacted you. And first contact is purely for marketing. So the first time they contacted you in marketing, but you haven't actually met them, so to speak, unless it's like at a conference or something. But it's just to put it into context when you met it. And once again, there's numbers, and those numbers refer to the retention period of how long you intend to hold it. And there's numbers to copy, including decimals for half a year or month. And there's also an infinity symbol, because you can hold information indefinitely if you were required to. For me and one of the architectural practices I'm involved with, we have to hold information for 25 years because that's how long we're suable for. Moving on to the how did we get it? Well, it's directly from the data subject via marketing activities given by a third party or purchased from a third party. Then the last one of the questions is who can access the data? Management, general staff, finance, HR or legal, suppliers, consultants, and contractors. And once again, there's an additional option with an X, which means it's processed outside of the EU. Where your data is processed is important, and you need to log it. Finally, to top off, we have the risks associated with the data, whether the risk is to individuals, the risk is to their rights, the risk is to their interests. Also, if there's any fully automated processing, whether you're processing any special categories of data, and if you've decided because there's too many points on the risk and it adds up to at least 6, then you need to do a data protection impact assessment on the data that you hold in that category. There's also an entry here for any mitigation mechanisms that you've used, for example, two-factor authentication. Here for staff files, they're stored in a locked cabinet and the digital versions are two-factor enabled. Where we have on financials, the third party is our accountant and they comply with PCI DSS. And any payment processors we use are ISO 27001 as well as PCI DSS. Moving down to the bottom, you see how the risks work with the severity and likelihood matrix. So whether if the severity is high but the likelihood is low, that will still get you a score of 5. If the severity and likelihood is low, then that's a blank. Medium, likelihood, low severity, 1, and so on. So that's the spreadsheet as it pieces together. If you move over, once you've done that, you also have the where, which is broken down into where the owned assets are, any third party, and the 3 types of cloud and PaaS, IaaS, and SaaS services. And you'll see that the what columns on the left correspond to the previous worksheet. But now there's more details, things have moved, so there's more on the security, the risks are broken down, so you can go into more nitty-gritty. The same with the access, who has access, and also the why, the business function as to why. So these, you don't start from scratch, you use the information from the previous main GDPR sheet to start populating on the left with the what's, and then you fill out as appropriate. So that's it for the overview. So next we'll move on to actually fill out the first side of the GDPR spreadsheet. Thank you. So the first step is to switch over to the GDPR worksheet and fill out some basic information like the date, your company, and who's filling this out. And then we move on to fill out the who section. Who is the data on? And we'll start with your staff. So copy the first blue square. And as staff is the one you'll have the most information on typically, just paste in to each relevant row in the what. So here we have name, address, email and telephone. We have dates of birth. We have a gender, marital status, dependents, because you might have childcare schemes, nationality, emergency contacts, next of kin. And then to pay them, you'll have their bank accounts, national insurance, tax references, pension details. Scroll down. You may have taken their passport when they first joined and you have a scan of it. You'll have their CV, references, pre-employment checks, education and training, annual appraisals, employment status, any permits, annual leave, any sickness they've informed you about, disciplinary and complaints, and membership of professional bodies. You may also have security clearance and criminal record checks depending on your business. Moving down to the monitoring, if you have any security cameras, you'll have CCTV footage, and if you've taken any photos for ID passes, you'll definitely have images. If you're also using any conferencing software, you'll probably have video and voice recordings of them as well. You'll have some health information based on them telling you about health conditions, hospital visits, etc., operations, so where they have to take time off work. And then for special category information, that's typically all most businesses collect. If you do collect anything else, be sure to tick it. And then you might also have their car registration number if you have a parking lot, so you know who's who. Then move back up to the top. If you've missed any out or made a mistake, just copy a white square and then just paste it as necessary wherever. Otherwise, we move on to potential staff. So once again, this is the information people have sent in typically on their CVs. So we'll have a name, address, email and telephone. Oops. You typically don't have a date of birth in a lot these days, but you'll have a gender, and then you'll have their CV and references and possibly an image. You may also have some social media information on them as well. So as you see, it builds up according to what information you have against the various types of people. So next is clients and customers. So in a purely business to business, you'll have a name, email and telephone, but if you also deal with home users, you might actually have their home address as well. You may ask for dates of birth for your customers, but in many cases you don't, so that's up to you according to what you have. Every business is different, so fill it in according to your business. So for your clients, you may know about their social media, and then you may know from that some of their employment history, their employment status, and whether they're part of any professional bodies. You may also have their IP address and images of them, their IP address from them visiting your website, and if you've had any conference calls, and also you may have cookies on them that have been stored when they visited you. Then you build up potential customers. So these are people that have made inquiries but have not actively become a customer. So you'll typically have less information on them. You may just have an IP address and a cookie. And then the information you have on your consultants and suppliers. So consultants, you don't tend to have their home addresses, but you'll have their email and their telephone. The same with suppliers. You'll have their titles. May have some, sorry, CV and employment history, and their employment status, professional bodies, and once again you may have IP addresses, cookies, and also images and voice recordings. And with consultants, they visited your business, so they may have CCTV. And also a car registration. Lastly, we have emergency contacts. These are your staff emergency contacts. These people have no connection to your business typically. They are not customers, they are not staff, they are not consultants or suppliers, but you hold information on them. So typically you'll have a name, address, and email, and a title, and that's pretty much about it for them. So that's the Who section filled out. Like I said, anything that's not quite right, or you need to update, or there's not enough of the right columns, if this doesn't meet your need, just right click and insert a new column. Likewise in the what, if there's a row you need to add, remember in the miscellaneous there's 2 others for you to fill out, but adjust as see fit. The one not to change though is the special categories. These are part of the GDPR legislation, so leave them as they are because they are set, defined areas, so don't change those. Okay, that's it for the Who section. Next, we fill out the Why section, the lawful basis for processing, and you'll notice that the green square for staff administration has the letter B. If you scroll down, you'll see that the 6 lawful bases each have a letter associated with them. Consent, contractual, legal obligation, vital interest, public task, and legitimate interest. So for staff administration, it will be contractual. Consent to be valid must be able to be withdrawn. So if you ask anything from your staff, if they can't withdraw that consent and it will affect them as an employee, it's not valid. So it's best to use contractual. So here we fill out and we match everything that's in the Who section here into the Why section. So we can just copy and paste to match. And there's a big block here, so we can actually just select a much larger block. And then there's nothing else here in personal details under the Why section. Under financial details, and then once again we have just one. And then scrolling down, we have a big block under employment. And the same for monitoring. When it comes to special categories, there's also an additional number as well as the letter. This number relates to one of the 10 additional conditions that are required for you to specify in order to process special category data. Now, number 8 is necessary for purposes of assessment of the working capacity of the employee, medical diagnosis, health, or social care. So any health information that you may have on any employee will be for this reason, and it's already pre-populated here with B8. If you have any other special category information, make sure you have both the letter for the lawful basis and the additional condition. Moving on, under car registration, that's just a normal B with contractual. Scroll back up to the top and now fill out your client administration. So here, these are the relevant blue squares. You can actually copy them in first and then choose which of the appropriate green lawful basis you want to choose. Now this is for clients, paying clients, and you typically have some type of contract with them where you have this information. So whatever's in the client, so this third column, we need to match up here. So everything tallies. So we're on the third one here, so that's that one, and then the last four. Okay, then back up to the top. Now we move on to consultants. So you can do the same thing as well. So you can just copy. If you want, you can copy whole rows in one go. And you'll have a contract with a consultant. See what else is under consultant. So employment status, professional bodies, and IP address. What else did we say? Third one in, pretty much everything there. So that's the consultant side. So whatever you have on this side here, you need to match up in the Y. And then you need to do the same with suppliers. And then there's any monitoring you do, any marketing activities. So the marketing activities is the reasons why, you're for potential customers. So anything for potential customers would normally come up into marketing activities. But now in this side, it'll be something they've given consent for. So no, that's still contractual. Let me just recopy consent. So they've given you consent to hold this information. So we are potential customers. So scroll down and they have an IP address. So we're in queue and a cookie. And then if you do any profiling, so supply administration, let's just quickly fill that one in. And once again, let's just grab under I, everything under I. And paste it in. And then we'll just copy, because you'll have some type of contractual agreement with the supplier. And let's see, with suppliers, we missed out the fact, and consultants, they would have given you their bank details to pay them. So for consultants and suppliers. You can see how you can build this up and amend as you go on. Okay, so that's it for the why section. Now we proceed to the where section, where we store the data. And we first concentrate on the first three columns: manual or printed records, local digital records, and local file server. The local digital records refers to equipment that you can typically physically access: laptops, desktops, USB drives, mobiles. And the local file server can be an actual server or network attached storage. Now, there's two types of orange squares here. One of them has an X. If you scroll down, you'll see that the one with an X means the data is located outside of the EU and also includes any backups relating to that. So let's go ahead and back up to the top, and let's start with manual records. So we'll paste according to line up to name, address, email, telephone. So these are what I know for staff. We have manual records, and once again, if there's a lot in one go, you can copy as many as you need. Scroll down, so manual records of staff, and we also have a photocopy of a passport. One second. And also CVs. In fact, we can safely say we have printout somewhere of all this, so we'll have manual records. We'll also have some health information based on staff, and the car registrations may be in a logbook at reception. So that's pretty much everything for manual records. Now for local digital records, we'll definitely have name, address, telephone, and same on a local file server. Things like a date of birth we won't have because that's just a paper record in our case. And then moving down, we may have emailed our accountants, so therefore we'll have local digital records, and they may be on the file server as well. If you have a scan of the passport, then it'll be on the server as well. Likewise, we can say all of these are held on a server. Let's try again. And with a number, in fact, you can probably safely say they're all also available on certain local devices. So now we move on to monitoring. Well, IP addresses may be held on a server or local devices. In fact, the same for all the other items there. So let's just grab that section, and that's it. So that's the first three columns of where filled out. Next we have a private cloud service, public cloud service, and external hosted services. These are all different. So the private cloud service, you are fully in charge, whether it's at a data center. The public cloud service is your Office 365s and similar Google apps, while an external hosted service is a company you're paying for a particular function that's held online. And lastly, the third party company, typically that will be your accountant for sure, and anyone else that you deal with who has access to the data. Okay, so using Office 365, it's in the EU for us. It's in Ireland, but things are backed up as well to another location. So I'm going to keep the X because they're backed up to the USA. So anything that's on the server, that is being backed up to the USA. So here I'm just clicking through. And once again, we can grab all of these. Okay, now I mentioned the accountant. So the accountant is in the country, and we would have given them all the staff information. So they'll have name, address, and also things like bank accounts, national insurance, tax references, and pension details to pay your staff. Let's see what else the pension company may be given. Nothing really on employment details, but you may work, say, with a HR advisor. So there'll be a third party, so you may be informing them of disciplinary, sickness, annual leave, permits, employment status, and appraisals. So that's it there. Let's go back up. If you have an external hosted service, our timesheet project management system is external, but it's in the UK, so I will grab similar information. There's no financials in that system, and let's see what else is, but it does have images. Okay, so that for me is, as a small business, where we store the data as a top overview. There's a more detailed where worksheet with drills down to the nitty-gritty, but this is just the overview of where we store the data. Now we move on to the when section, when we obtain the information. Now there's numbers again in these yellow squares. One of them though isn't a number, it's the infinity symbol, which means you're going to keep this information indefinitely or can't define a set period. So when it comes to your own staff, you can't say you're going to delete it after 3 years because they may still be working for you in 3 years. So for purposes of this workbook, just use the infinity symbol where you don't know and you're going to keep it a lot longer than a set period of time. So working through staff, let's start copying, working our way down. The number, though, I forgot to say, is the number of years that you will hold on and retain the information. If we scroll down, you can see there's the retention period, and there's things like 0.1, 0.3, and 0.5. So 0.5 is 6 months. 0.1, it's not quite a month, but it's close enough. 0.3 is a quarter, so 3 months. So you can use this for your retention. Chances are you'll probably use 1, 3, or a higher number. So let's come back up. So like I said, I'm holding staff information on once they're appointed. So I'll just grab all of this. Okay, and things like their bank accounts will have and likewise all the information regarding their employment details that gets collected over time. Now we may have CCTV images of them, and that may only be held for a set period of time, but we're just saying we don't know how long we'll be keeping them, and the same for voice recordings. So back up to the top. Now the next when column is on pre-appointment, so they've sent it to you, they know, they're coming to see you and someone has sent stuff to you. So we're saying we're holding this information for 3 years. Now this can be for a client, it can be for a consultant. So let's work out what we'll have on them. So they sent it to you in advance. So I'm following the consultants and clients rows here of what we have, of what we typically hold things in for. We may have their bank details as well, sorry, not their national insurance, to pay them. Likewise, we know who they work for, their employment status, and professional body. Moving down, so we'll have an IP address, we'll have images. If they visit us, we'll have CCTV. Sorry, not on pre-appointment, they haven't come. So this is then what they're sending us. So that should be pretty much what they've sent us in advance. So my mistake, we wouldn't have an IP address. This is what they're sending us. So now this is at request, where you've asked for them to send it in. So this is one where you're controlling it more. So whether it's for some pre-approval, whatever the reason is, the fact that you've asked for this information, they haven't sent it in advance thinking you might need it. So once again, we're going to follow the consultants and clients and potential staff area. Okay, and images. Next is when you've obtained it, they've given it to you while you're interacting with them at the time. So once again, this takes how long you want to retain the information. So we're saying a year. And at the time, we'll also include things like your IP addresses, and possible CCTV recorded images, video and voice recordings, especially if you're using conferencing facilities. And you may have even asked for their car registration number when they turned up in the building. Then lastly is the marketing side of things, first contact. So yeah, they've filled out something online, they've agreed, given consent. So how long you'll hold this information for, and it will just be typically name, address, and then scrolling down, you'll probably have a cookie and maybe an IP address. In fact, you probably have a cookie on that one as well. Okay, so the retention period, you adjust them to suit your needs, your business requirements. This is just the starting point, so you have an idea of what you have to put in place to track retention periods and deal with the appropriate data. That's it for the when section. We've covered the who, why, where, when, so we move now on to the how. How did you get the information? And typically this will be directly from the data subject for most cases. We have a grey square, but if we scroll down, you'll see that there's also some numbers as possible options. This is the number of years where you're expected to be able to update and validate the data. A blank grey square means you're not obliged to update it. So let's grab a 1 for 1 year, because some of this we'll probably want to check. So we have name, address, email. I'm going to grab the square because what doesn't change is people's dates of birth. And so once again, we line up to whatever you have across here. We need a grey square as well. So gender and title can change, marital status can change. In fact, most things can change and would need to be updated. Sorry about that. So now things like bank, so all of this, you could put a half in there, or if you wanted to say that you want to update and check this and validate every 6 months or monthly, but you don't want to be creating too much work for yourselves. So chances are you scan a passport the first time someone starts, you don't tend to check it and update it. Likewise on references, employment checks, education. Okay, but you could say when it comes to annual leave, permits, you will validate them, as well as professional bodies. Okay, and employment status. Okay, so things like IP address, you don't get directly from them, but it's fully automated when they use it, so we might as well put it here. CCTV images, you could get directly from them, as well as voice and video. In fact, let's just fill them all out to be sure. Same with health information, that will come directly from them, and same with their car registration number. Next is via online marketing activities. So that's how you got the information. So we can just fill in what we'll get: name, address, email, telephone number, gender, possible social media, as well as an IP address and possibly a cookie. You might have also got an image. Same for given by a third party and purchased by a third party. If you don't have any of these, just leave them blank. You don't have to fill in everything in this template. It is a template. Adjust them to suit. If there's something better to change up here, go ahead and change it. So as far as information given by a third party, well, your consultants could refer you to other consultants, and you end up contacting them or have information on them. So once again, let's just grab what we have. What a third party could give you. So references, someone's CV, and employment status, professional bodies, and even images, video recordings and voice recordings if they give you a shared conference meeting. So that's the how section. Now we move on to who can access the data. The departments and type of roles that will access your data range from management, general staff, finance departments, HR and legal, your suppliers, consultants and contractors. there's any others that don't fit into these categories, then please amend to suit, create additional columns to meet your requirements. Once again, just like the where, we have an X as a possible option. If you scroll down, this you can see means that the data is processed outside of the EU, while no X means it's processed within the EU. So what we'll do, we'll just grab that X to move over to the side, because I know some of our suppliers are outside of the EU, as well as our consultants and contractors. Everyone else is not. So the first 4 here we're concentrating on. So across the board, management, general staff, finance and HR and legal will have access to things like name, address, emails and telephone numbers, as well as titles. Things like date of birth is restricted to more financial and HR. And then things like social media accounts may be across the board as well. Things like your bank accounts, now moving on to financial details. Once again, that'll be just finance and HR again, tax references and so on. In some companies, management may have access to this as well, depending on the size of the business. So keeping going down, same with passport information, things like CV and general employment. You may have company CVs, but things like the references would be management and HR, possibly legal. Premium employment checks is the same. Education and training could be across the board. Annual appraisals could just be HR, but once again, legal could always be possibly involved. Same with employment status, immigration, annual leave, sickness, and membership of professional bodies. That would be across the board. You could even say employment status, everyone can see that. Moving down to monitoring. So everyone will be able to access images and potential video recordings and voice recordings, especially if you're using things like Zoom or Microsoft Teams. And then everything else, IP addresses, CCTV, cookies and apps is management. Health information we're saying is just HR and legal, but you probably email your line manager, so we'll put in management there. And then everyone can probably read the visitor book and see car registration numbers. Moving on to our suppliers, and don't forget, people like your accountants are a supplier, so not only will they have all this basic information, they may have a date of birth, they may also have social media, and also the bank details and pension details of your staff. They may have some basic employment history, professional bodies, and employment status. And if they're having to work out sick pay and things like that. So now moving up to consultants. Once again, we said they're outside of the EU as well as inside. Same with contractors. So we're doing like a catch-all. We don't tend to give them date of birth information. They may have access to people's social media. And then moving on, we may share or may have access to people's CVs and employment status and professional bodies. They must also have access to images, voice recordings, and that's about it for building up who has access to the data. This is once again a general overview. There's a more detailed access workbook that really drills down. Now we have everything we need to start working out the risks that are associated with our data. The risk section's obviously in red, and we have 6 columns to look at. The first 3 are the risks to individuals' data, their individual rights, their individual interests. And this is done with a 3x3 risk matrix down the bottom of severity and likelihood. If something is a high likelihood with a high severity, it's given a number 8, while a low severity and low likelihood is a blank because effectively it's a 0. Also down the bottom you see that we have mitigation examples for that section, and the 4th to 6th columns require a yes or no answer. So once again, copy and paste what you need. So here we'll grab things that have a low likelihood but a medium risk. So let's work down what we have. So let's start off with some bank account information. So we know that them to lose that, it'll be a risk to their interests. So we can say all of this, there's a certain amount of risk. Individuals' rights, if they lose their name, address, email, telephone, well, not a lot with their email because they give that out. Generally, depends on what your business does, what you're storing, how you're storing it, and everything based on the information you have. So working through and working out your risks, if you're not sure, leave them blank and try and speak to someone who deals with risk and get some professional advice just to help fill out this section. You can always flick over to the example where certain things are filled out. So here we have a risk on email. It's given a 1, and there's a mitigation of 2-factor authentication enabled. Further down on date of birth, also given a risk of 1 against individual interests, and it says it's stored in a locked cabinet. And also where it's held digitally, 2-factor is also enabled. Down here we have the accountant, where we're saying there's some medium risks. The accountant complies with PCI DSS or possibly ISO 27001, which is in this case for credit cards. So let's just grab all of this because we can use it in the main one just to give you an idea. So we've filled out, is there any form of automated processing? No. Are there any special category information? Well, the only special category information we have happened to be health. So let's just grab that and put it in place. So that's that. So then we can come up here and then we can make that a no as well. And people's name, well, there's no risk there. So we said on email, we can, at any point you can grab something and then just change the number. So mitigation, we said 2-factor authentication. If you want, you can just copy again from the bottom, just to keep it all uniform. So work through, so automated processing, that's, in this business, there isn't any. So you can populate all of these. And let's just start grabbing bigger chunks. Okay, and the last one here, this is important. DPIA required if any yes or row, if there's a yes here or there's 6+. So if these scores here add up to more than 6 or higher, sorry, then you're going to have to create a data protection impact assessment to look at how this affects you and what you need to do about it. The one here that you may need to build a data protection impact assessment is on the health information you have on your own staff. Unless, of course, you have enough mitigation mechanisms so you know that you don't have to worry about anything. So building up the risks take time, and every business is different. And once you've filled this out, you can then move on to the more detailed where, and then who has access, the third parties that can access your system, and the more detailed why business function. And these are the same as the other sheet, but things have been moved around to answer more detailed questions. So on the why, you would copy over the what that you had before. So you would grab the blue, in fact the Y, the green Y information, and then you will then also say who has access to it and the risks. But now the business function, finance, human, is broken down into more granular. So if you want, only certain people can do certain things. These are all optional. These are more detailed sheets. Same with the where. This breaks it down into where on your own assets, third parties, and then the 3 types of cloud services: infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. And as you can see, there's a lot of software as a service options and space for you to tweak and amend according to what you use. This helps you classify where your data is, because believe me, it'll be in a lot more places than you think it is. And the access is looking at the various third parties that you are sharing information with to give you a better idea of who's got what and who can have access to it. And then if there's something you're not sure of or you don't like, or you think maybe they shouldn't have that, you can then put things in place to either stop handing them that information, ask them to remove it, or whatever you need to do to meet your requirements as a part of the GDPR legislation. So the GDPR first sheet is an overview. It gives you a first glance of what you have. But then once you've filled it in, use this information to go and fill out the last 3 individual where, access, and why sheets. And don't forget, the example sheet will give you a good idea of how to fill it out. There is no right or wrong because it's based on what your business actually does. So I didn't put in anything about credit cards when I just filled out the demo, but your business probably will. And don't forget, third parties acting on your behalf, if they mess up, it still comes back to you, remember. So fill that bit out. Thank you very much for this short demo of how to fill out the spreadsheet. If you have any questions, please email me at info@booleanlogical.com. Thank you.